Recently, Ripple gave an update around Ripple Swell, and the big theme was the growing engagement from traditional finance with RLUSD. RLUSD is quickly turning into a much bigger stablecoin than most people expected. But when you consider the size of Ripple as a company and the track record they've built over the last decade, it becomes very clear. This is still only the beginning for RLUSD and for what Ripple is trying to build. Ripple shared a snapshot of where they stand so far this year. They closed a $500 million strategic investment at a $40 billion valuation, led by Fortress Investment Group and Citadel Securities. They've processed over $95 billion in total Ripple payments volume, more than $1 billion in RLUSD stablecoin market cap, 6 strategic acquisitions completed in just 2 years, 25% of Ripple shares repurchased, 3 times growth in their Ripple Prime business, and 75 regulatory licenses globally. That's the kind of momentum you need if you're actually serious about building what they call the Internet of Value and not just a speculative side project. And this isn't just a static snapshot. Ripple keeps making a bigger dent in the space month after month. One of the most recent examples is ROUSD getting a full green light from the Abu Dhabi FSRA. Compliance and trust are non-negotiable for institutional finance. That's why ROUSD has been greenlisted by Abu Dhabi's regulator. On the exact same day, we saw Tether get a 5 rating from S&P, and just to be clear, that's not 5 out of 5 in a good way. 1 is the best, 5 is the worst. So think about that contrast. Ripple and ROUSD are positioning themselves as fully compliant, regulated, transparent. At the same time, the biggest legacy stablecoin on the market is getting flagged with the lowest stability score by a major ratings agency. Ripple has been playing the long game from day one. They've chosen the harder path, work with regulators, lean into transparency, and build trust with institutional players who actually move trillions, not just retail traders. We're heading into a world where compliance rules, where utility is what drives value, and where the biggest winners will be the companies that have been quietly building with institutions for a decade. Ripple checks every single one of those boxes. Now, on top of that, we just got a really important update from Reese Merrick, Senior Executive Officer and Managing Director for the Middle East and Africa at Ripple. He made a crucial point. Stablecoins were originally just a simple on-ramp to buy crypto. Fast forward to 2025, and while a big chunk of stablecoins are still used for that, we're now seeing a massive shift. They're increasingly being used for real payments. And Ripple is seeing that demand explode. Look at how on-chain stablecoin transfers have grown over the last 5 years. 2020, about $0.5 trillion in on-chain transfers. 2021, around $2.5 trillion. 2022, about $5 trillion. 2023, roughly $10 trillion. 2024, that number jumps to $27.6 trillion. And year to date in 2025, we're on track for around $46 trillion in on-chain stablecoin transfers. $46 trillion. That's more settled volume than Visa and Mastercard combined last year. Not more than one of them, more than both together. That's a huge signal that the world is waking up to on-chain payments, cross-border remittances, payroll in emerging markets, B2B settlements, merchants directly accepting stablecoins. This isn't a niche experiment anymore. This is becoming the internet's new payment layer, growing at around 150% CAGR, while the old legacy payment rails are basically stagnating. And this is exactly where Ripple and ROUSD are positioning themselves. ROUSD is issued under a New York Department of Financial Services, NYDFS, limited purpose trust company charter. That's widely regarded as one of the strictest and most respected regulatory frameworks in global finance. It forces strong operational standards, strong compliance, and strong risk management. Why does that matter? Because as this space becomes more regulated and adoption skyrockets, transparency and trust will be the key that separates the winners from the losers. Ripple understands that. That's why if you go to their public policy content, they've spent years laying out their stance on regulation across multiple regions: the United States global crypto policy, Latin America, Canada, the Middle East and Africa, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, Asia. This didn't happen overnight. Even back in 2023, it was already obvious that as crypto moved into a more regulated phase, you had to focus on players that embrace regulation instead of fighting it. Companies that are fully compliant, want to work with regulators, push for clear rules, and build products that institutions can actually use. Ripple has consistently been in that category, SEC lawsuit or not. That's why what Reese is saying about a more regulated world isn't just theory. Ripple has been preparing for this moment for years. Now let's come back to ROUSD's current position. Right now, there's just under $1.3 billion tied to ROUSD, and that number is up almost 31% in just the last 30 days. A lot of people look at the breakdown and say, well, there's about $1 billion of ROUSD on Ethereum and only around $235 million on XRP. So this is only bullish for Ethereum, right? This is where most people completely miss the bigger picture. Back in July, I pointed out that saying ROUSD is useless for XRP because most of the supply is on Ethereum is a short-sighted take. Here's why. Right now, Ethereum is still the dominant network for stablecoins and DeFi. If you look at stablecoins by network, Ethereum holds over 60% of the market share. If you look at tokenization, Ethereum is again at the top, with over $12 billion in tokenized assets tied to it. I don't have the exact market share percentage, but it's clearly massive and very significant. So of course, a new, serious, institutional-grade stablecoin is going to launch most of its liquidity on the biggest stablecoin and DeFi network first. That's just where the liquidity is today. But here's the key. This won't last forever. As demand grows and we start to see much bigger use cases, real institutional size, the inefficiencies of Ethereum become impossible to ignore: scalability bottlenecks, congestion when activity spikes, gas fees that become ridiculous under heavy load. We've already seen big players reacting to this. For example, JP Morgan moved from private Ethereum tech to public chains with their JPM coin and Onyx platform. And the public chain they chose wasn't Ethereum. That's a signal. This isn't about being an XRP maxi or an Ethereum maxi. It's about looking at the tech and the realities. Can the network scale? Are fees predictable and low? Can it handle institutional volumes without breaking? XRP Ledger's strengths become more obvious as institutional activity grows. And keep in mind, ROUSD isn't the only stablecoin on the XRP Ledger. Right now, there's over $430 million in total stablecoin market cap on XRPL. ROUSD is a big part of that, but definitely not the only one. We already have around 6 stablecoins live or launching on XRPL, including BoroU, SDBBRL, euro-denominated stablecoins, and Australian digital dollar, Braza Bank's USDB USDC. Some others are in the pipeline or launching across multiple chains, like XSGD from StraitsX, which hasn't gone live on XRPL yet, and EURV, which comes from a major institutional player, Société Générale. EURV is scheduled to launch on multiple blockchains as well, and is a big one to watch. These initial 6 stablecoins went live on the XRP Ledger around June, and since then we've seen even more stablecoin initiatives and interest from big banks and institutions. Just in the last stretch of news around stablecoins, we've seen India signaling openness to a stablecoin framework, a U.S. bank piloting a bank-issued stablecoin on Stellar A Firm, preparing a USD-backed stablecoin on Tempo Paxos, acquiring Fortify S&P, downgrading USDT's stability rating. The trend is very clear. Stablecoin activity is accelerating, not slowing down. And when you combine that with the projection of $46 trillion in yearly stablecoin transfers, it's hard to argue that nothing is changing. 2 years ago, we were at $10 trillion. The growth is explosive. Big names like Citi are also getting involved in stablecoin initiatives and tokenized deposits. The momentum is undeniable. When I look at all of this, the explosive growth in stablecoin volume, the shift of the fiat economy moving on-chain, the rise of institutional-grade stablecoins on networks like XRP Ledger, I go back to something I said months ago. The revolution of our financial system that we've talked about for years is no longer a future concept. It's here. It's happening. We're already seeing stablecoins reach specific percentages of the global money supply. That is a massive shift. In one single month, we had confirmation of 4 stablecoins launching on the XRP Ledger. That's not noise. That's an infrastructure build-out. And remember, this goes way beyond just payments for coffee. Cross-border payments, tokenization, institutional DeFi. Even the FX market, which does around $7.5 trillion per day. All of this is gradually moving on-chain. Do we need all of it to run on the XRP Ledger? Of course not. XRP doesn't have to be the global bridge currency for everything. We just need meaningful slices of these markets to flow through networks like XRPL for there to be enormous value and utility. The key point is the shift is already underway. We're moving toward a more regulated crypto environment, a more digital financial system. A market where trust and transparency decide who survives Ripple already has that. The XRP Ledger already has that. The XRPL has been tested by some of the biggest names in the world, including central banks like the Bank of England, with successful trials. This is where the future tech starts pulling away from the legacy tech. What Ripple is doing with XRP, with the XRP Ledger, and now with ROUSD, is exactly what you'd expect to see at the front edge of this transition. We're watching the entire fiat system slowly move on-chain. Stablecoins are exploding in volume, regulations are tightening, and the winners will be those utility giants that built for this moment. Ripple, XRP, XRPL, and ROUSD are right in the middle of that story. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to subscribe to XRP Daily Brief and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.